And he said, he was very quiet because, I was like, what, okay, what are you going to do to help me today? And I really feel like he connected with some part of me, and he made a decision, and it wasn't an easy decision for a chiropractor to make, for a health practitioner to make. But he said, your body wants to be stuck, go home. There's nothing I can do for you because you want to be stuck. And I was pretty angry on the way home. And if there is, help me. I need help now. And I really did not expect much. But as I asked that question, I just started feeling these waves of golden light and warmth go through my body. And I could feel an unwinding. And then for whatever reason, I don't know why, Catherine, it came into my mind, this thought, I wonder what my back looks like. And there was zero expectations to get an answer to this. But I literally felt like somebody switched this light on and I could literally see my back. Like I had x-ray vision. And after the initial discomfort and pride, I thought, hey, this is my opportunity.
What if the pain you are experiencing is not a problem to fix, but a language to learn? Ina Segal spent years trapped in chronic pain, seeing practitioners 3 to 5 times a week, until one frustrated chiropractor told her, "Your body wants to be stuck." That statement changed everything. Today, she reveals how she discovered her body's language, the golden light, and intergenerational trauma stored in her cells, and the 3 simple steps to befriend your body and unlock real healing. This is not about a quick fix. This is about learning what your body has been trying to tell you all along. So let us begin. Hello, beautiful souls. We have another amazing guest for you this week. We have the beautiful Ina Segal, all the way from Brisbane in Australia, which is very rare. I was just saying to Ina, it's very rare that we have someone from Australia, but it's awesome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Catherine. Great to be here with you.
Thank you. And Ina, the way that we love to start the show is we always love to ask our guest what inspired you to do what you do today.
For me, it was healing myself. So I had debilitating back pain, digestive issues, anxiety, psoriasis all over my skin. And I just really felt like I was taught from a young age to go to any health and medical practitioner, mainly medical, with the attitude of, I don't really know anything. I'm just going to take on whatever you say, and I'm going to I'm going to pop a pill into my mouth, and it should be magically fixed, whatever the issue I have. And then I get on with my life. And that's just not what was happening for me. And so by the time I got to about 18, 19, I was going to see somebody between 3 and 5 times a week. Most of the people were alternative by that stage. And I would have definitely times where I felt better, but invariably I would go back and get worse, or just as bad as where I started, because I was going with this attitude, the attitude of, I don't have to do anything, don't have to know my body and I, like, we have no connection almost, besides whatever somebody else can do for me. And I had this really profound experience where I was seeing this chiropractor. It was at least a year, if not more. And one day I just woke up, and I just thought to myself, I can't keep going like this. I'm in agony. I can't keep living like this. I would have been 20 at the time. And I went into his office. I came in. He heard about how bad it was because I was pretty much crying on the phone. He came out of his office and he just stood there, which was very strange. It had never happened before like that. And he said to me, "Your body's stuck." And I was like, "Tell me something I don't know." "Yeah, I know this. I know this part." And he said, he was very quiet because, I was like, "What? Okay, what are you going to do to help me today?" And I really feel like he connected with some part of me, and he made a decision, and it wasn't an easy decision for a chiropractor to make, for a health practitioner to make, but he said, your body wants to be stuck, go home. There's nothing I can do for you because you want to be stuck. And I was pretty angry on the way home. But I had been studying, I was doing professional writing and editing course at the time at, I think it was at TAFE. I had gone from uni to TAFE, but I had studied linguistics. So while I was at uni, I studied linguistics, but I moved to TAFE because they were way better teachers. And I was like, oh, I want to learn from the best, which was a very strange thing to me at the time. But as I was studying all this, language was a big thing for me. And so I started to think about that concept. Your body wants to be stuck. Well, does my body have a language? Is it speaking Japanese, Chinese, like letters that I cannot even read, that make no sense to me? But it's speaking, but clearly I'm not listening. I don't know how to listen. I don't know. Nobody's talked to me about this in this way before. And so on the way home, all these thoughts were coming into my mind. And I thought, well, one thing I haven't tried, I'm going to say, is I have never tried healing myself. I don't actually even know what that means or what that looks like, but I'm just going to go home and do it. And when I went home, um, I obviously didn't know what I was doing, where to start. So I started with just simply placing my hands on my back. And when I did that, I realized that I was always holding my breath. And the only time I didn't hold my breath was when I went to my acting classes, which I was doing as well at the time. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to breathe with the pain, which was very scary. And as I was doing that, and it wasn't pleasant, it wasn't comfortable. Of course, my mind was coming in and becoming negative and saying, well, who do you think you are that you're going to heal yourself when no one could? And so I thought, hey, how do I slow this down? So I started counting backwards from 30. And at that point, this thought came into my head after, a few moments. And I just thought, I just wonder. And there was a conflict that I was dealing with at the time with this thought. But I wonder if there is something higher than me. There is something divine in this kind of on this planet. And if there is, help me. I need help now. And I really did not expect much. But as I asked that question, I just started feeling this waves of golden light and warmth go through my body. And I could feel an unwinding. And then for whatever reason, I don't know why, Catherine, it came into my mind this thought, I wonder what my back looks like. And there was zero expectations to get an answer to this. But I literally felt like somebody switched this light on and I could literally see my back like I had x-ray vision. And after the initial discomfort and fright, I thought, hey, this is my opportunity. I mean, I really want to know, why do I have this? And it was like a tableau of memory meets kind of vision that came in front of my eyes. And I became very aware of the fact that I came to Australia from Eastern Europe. I did not know one word of English. I was bullied pretty badly for being from Eastern Europe and being different, not speaking English, which was really rough for me because I was one of those very outgoing, easy to be around children. And I went from that into getting psoriasis all over my skin, into crying every day and being very internalized. And so from there, there was, as I acknowledged it, and that was really, really interesting to me, it was almost like, I hear you. I've just heard this language. The next image that showed up was there was kind of my family, the conflicts that my parents were having. I didn't feel safe fully or relaxed coming home because they were always fighting and arguing. But at the same time, I also went to a private school, and in that private school, my parents didn't realize that we'd go from bullying for not speaking English to bullying for not being rich and wealthy, because most of the kids were from those types of families. And I started developing back pain and again, kind of going within and getting frustrated and getting angry. And from there, yeah, I just started getting back pain. My mom started taking me to physio, to doctors, whatever she could. And it progressively got worse. I'd had digestive issues from when I was a child, and I really got a sense of this, that my grandparents had this really traumatic life where my grandmother, her mother literally got killed to save my grandmother's life during the war. And she was part of 8 children. And essentially, my grandmother was the only one who survived the war. And so there was a lot of kind of intertwined trauma without speaking about it. And as I kind of acknowledged all of this, I realized I was one of those sponges. Like, I just took on people's energy. And in all of these insights, and it was quite a lot for somebody who did not fully understand these types of insights, I fell asleep, and I really felt a peacefulness and an unwinding that I had not felt before that. And when I woke up in the morning, I still had pain, but it decreased dramatically. So, maybe 30% of pain compared to what I had before. And so I knew something had happened, but there was also this sense, well, it's not like I've never had releases before. Is this going to last? How do I make it last? How do I prevent this from, getting worse, or how do I dissolve this pain? And so that was my big focus, big question. And I got my journal out because I was a writer, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to start journaling anything that shows up. I'm going to link it all. And so from there, several weeks went by, and I just saw progressive improvements. In particular, it was very clear in terms of my skin, that all the psoriasis that was on my elbows, on my knees, disappeared and never came back from that. And then my back, which was the main pain point, disappeared. My anxiety went, probably 90% down. And the digestive issues were a big challenge. It took way, way longer. And I still think that I'm very conscious of what I put into my mouth. Like, sometimes we go on holidays with my partner, and he's like, oh, come on, chill, just have whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm checking the packets. I'm like, if it's got toxic stuff, I don't put it into my mouth. So, it was this really incredible healing, self-healing experience. And then I realized that this ability that I didn't even know anything about, essentially, of tuning in, let's say, seeing into my body, opened up in a way where I could help others and I could see into other people's bodies. And so, even though my purpose, or so I thought at the time, was I want to be an entertainer, I wanted to act, I wanted to write, was definitely nothing to do with alternative health. Um, I started thinking, well, if if there is a gift that you discover within yourself, then shouldn't you use it? And maybe I'll use my writing skills by writing articles about people who were at the time quite well known, and wrote books about wellness, let's just say, and spirituality, and different things that all of a sudden became very interesting to me, and see what happens. And so that's what I did. I started interviewing people, I started going to courses. I'm one of those people that I kind of feel like if you study writing and editing, and in particular linguistics, you learn how to research, and you learn how to be very detailed, and you learn to look for details, because in some ways writing is both creative but also quite mathematical in terms of editing. And I was doing both, and journalism, and all of these different parts to it. And so it was, so I kind of tried to go into it methodically. And sometimes he will say, yeah, but why didn't you go and study at university to do what you're doing? And I'm like, show me a course 25 years later that has that at university. I would have. if I could have, you know, but it doesn't exist. So yeah, that's how I really became inspired to change people's lives.
And for those that don't know you, well, this is like there's so many questions that have bubbled up for me, which I'll ask you in a minute. So for those that actually don't know what do you do specifically?
I teach people essentially how to understand this language of their body and how to work with everything that is going on, both physically, emotionally, mentally, that became a physical problem, or sometimes it is just an emotional problem, or they're stuck in their lives and they really don't know where to go. So I kind of focus on many layers and levels of diving deep into what holistic healing meets I guess, who are you on the deepest level? Why are you here? What are you doing? What is this life about? How do you find your deepest purpose in life? I just did a course on this recently, and but essentially, how do you live your best life? I guess that's what my focus is.
Love it, love it. So I guess some of the questions that popped up for me when you were talking, sharing your story, and thank you so much for that. And I think also before we got on the show, we were talking about like how do we begin to recognize what our body is communicating to us, because I was saying it's not till you're in that pain, like you said, like you were in pain, you had a back pain, or I was explaining migraines, for example, and then you look at it, obviously the meaning to migraines where it says, Catherine, get better with your boundaries. And I'm like, oh, of course. But how do we listen? Because obviously there's many layers. So obviously one's ancestral, because you're talking about your grandmother. So there's obviously we carry some sort of pain
Yeah,
through. It's linear, like it's kind of like in our DNA,
yeah,
generational trauma or generational pain. Then the layer as well is from your mother, and then from self. So there's so many layers to this. So how do we make it simple? How do we first start with the self? How do we recognize what our body's trying to communicate to us before we get to that pain point? Like I said, before I get the book out, I go, oh, I'm just going to be better with my boundaries.
look, I think one of the biggest challenges in life is that we run through life, we're stressed through life, we're constantly in the doing mode. So essentially, until you slow down, it is very difficult to connect with your body, because most of the time, the more anxious you are, the more in the head you're going to be, and the less you're going to feel, because your nervous system is going to go into this fight or flight mode, or you're going to be in that adrenaline, just getting things done, right? And that's what I see a lot of. So until somebody says, well, actually, I want to know. So you actually have to say, I want to know, and I'm going to slow down, and my body essentially is going to be the barometer of my life. So every day, so it becomes a practice. People need to start creating a practice, like a meditation practice, where you wake up in the morning, and rather than, getting out of bed and running to get your cup of coffee, what if you just connected to your body? Now, it is very challenging to connect to your body when you've been in your head most of the time. And what I say to people, the way to do it, there's many, many ways, but one of the simplest ways to do it is to move your body. So actually getting up and starting, let's say, a process where you go, let me close my eyes for a moment and check, where do I feel tension, right? That's not hard. We all know, we can all recognize that. So wherever you have tension, placing your hands on that part of your body. So by placing your hands on that part of your body, you're actually activating your ability to focus on this. So your brain and your nervous system start to go, okay, let's concentrate on what's really going on in this part of the body. And so you're putting attention onto it, but you're also, the touch makes it a lot easier. And then you start to become aware of your breath. Am I holding my breath? Can I breathe a little bit deeper? Because you cannot get any information from your body if you're holding your breath. So breathing into the body, into that particular part of the body where you're holding your hands. And then from there, you might go a little further and you go, well, what is this tension about? Am I, or if I could describe this tension to you, Catherine, how would I describe it? And can I start to link something to do with what I'm doing? Like you're saying, boundaries, for instance. What am I doing? Am I overwhelmed because I'm just doing too much and I'm constantly running and rushing? And my body's actually saying, I'm like, this is uncomfortable. This is really tense. So we can start with the most simplest things. And what I say to people, okay, so once you've understood that part, the next thing you can go to is if, and I know you have my color cards, if this had a color, what color would it be? Just simply bringing some consciousness to it. And now we're creating something that we can work with that's a little bit energetic. And we go, okay, and if it's that color, is this a healthy color or an unhealthy color for my body? Most of the time, it's going to be unhealthy. And if it had a shape, what would it be? And so you might get, okay, it's a circle and it's brown or gray. And so from there, I actually now created a link with my body, but I want to go a little bit deeper to connect more. And so I might go, okay, well, I don't need this brown, gray, energetic circle inside a ball of energy inside my chest, let's say. So I'm actually I'm going to do a little bit of visualizing, but it's a standing visualization. So I'm going to visualize that there is this fire in front of me. And I say, bring the color purple just because, I'm the person who works with colors, and purple is the color of transformation. And so as you bring that color, and so this is the fire. Now you're going to let go. Now you're in that letting go process. And I say to people, so be aware of how you feel before. Now we're going to scoop this up and we're essentially going to put that stress and that energy into the fire, but we're going to shake our arm. So we're going to shake our arm for about 30 to 45 seconds with the intention of, I'm letting go, I'm letting go, I'm letting go. And then once we do that and we stop, we'll usually feel a very, complete difference between whatever side of the body we've done this on. And then I'll say to people, okay, so now we get back to the nervous system and we go, the colors that really calm the nervous system down are either blue or green. So blue is more if you're an anxious type of a person, but not if you're depressed, because again, colors actually do really impact you. So, or you have circulation problems. So not blue then. So if you're depressed or you have that, then green, or if you just want to regenerate. And you can visualize your whole nervous system, in particular the back and your spine being, flooded by this green light as you take some slow, deep breaths in and out, breathing through the nose, out through the mouth, which is the way to calm the nervous system down. And then you do the same with the other hand, and then you do it again. So essentially for about 15 minutes in the morning, you're waking your body up and you're actually asking the questions of how is my body feeling and communicating, and you're getting to know it. And you're also letting go at the same time. So this is one of the simplest and easiest ways to combine, wake the body up, release some tension and energy, calm the nervous system down, and refocus on your day, and also start to get messages from your body.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So, because you've got a book that you can actually look up any element and you have like the actual meaning behind the emotion or the ailment that's available, like a sore back, or which I do have one, by the way. So I just went and saw my Chinese doctor today. She does acupuncture and cupping. So, but how did you come to understanding the signs of every part of the body? I find that really fascinating.
So I think, as I was saying, being having studied how to linguistics meets, how to write and research. I have that brain, like that type of um outlook on life. So I break everything down. It's so funny because people go, well, how does science take what you do? I'm like, I don't know, but I do know that I can sit with any scientist and explain things on, around spirituality or emotions or mental thing, mental health in a very different way, in a very detailed way, because that's how I study things, and in a very logical way. So let's look at the body and break it down a little bit from the perspective of the utility. What does the body actually do? And that was my question first. I was tuning into people, I'm going to say, and I was getting a lot of information and I was writing this down. That's how it all started. And at the same time, the way, like I said, my mind works, because I'm actually, if I didn't have the abilities that I had, I would be the most skeptical person you would meet. You cannot convince me of something that is not logical. So I was like, okay, so I'm going to break the body down into what does each part of the body do? What it is, function. So if we start with anything from, let's say, eyesight. So we start from eyesight and we go, what do eyes do? And the child can obviously understand that and say, well, we see through the eyes. So then my question became, so what would make us have challenges with our vision? And I'm that person that will go, what would make you be born with it? What would make you have it, develop it when you're, let's say, 6 or 7 years old? What would make you develop it later in life? And all the different parts. So I would ask these questions, and if we had to just go through the general understanding of it, essentially the most logical answer is there's something in front of you that you don't want to see, whether it is trauma, pain, conflict, challenge, secrets, things that you know are there, but maybe you don't see it, but they're coming. you know there's something that your inner self says, it is not safe. It's not safe for me to see this. And the body always wants to come back to that sense of equilibrium and safety. And so I would look at that, I was like, okay, well, let's take the general population of why they would lose their vision at, let's say, from 40 on. And to me, logically, what makes sense is that, and we were talking about this, in our little chat before, somebody in your family starts to get sick. They get older, they have ailments, they get sick, you're watching it. You might feel helpless, hopeless. I don't know what to do. What can I do to help this person? And the more helpless, hopeless you feel, and the more you feel like, oh my God, and this part of my life is breaking down, and I don't have control of this area, and that, your vision, because there's an intelligence inside of your inner self, your vision goes, I'm just going to go blurry, because that's the easiest way not to see this. Now, it's not that any human being sits there and says, well, I don't want to see because, look, this is what's happening. They don't understand how our inner self actually works. And so the same with the ears. And if we go to the ears, because I'm talking to so many people about it, and seems like a big issue at the moment with lots of people. So to me, there's a few things that happen with this. One, when people start losing the hearing, very often, I just find this is an interesting fact, they're exhausted. It's just, they have this exhaustion that in terms of life. On the other hand, they every person has been thousands that I've asked this question to at different times, since my 25 years of doing this. When I would go, so let's break down what it is you don't want to hear. And it's not always obvious, right? And actually, it's often not obvious what they don't want to hear, because the body is also, it doesn't, you don't lose your hearing or your eyesight immediately when you see something most of the time. I mean, it has to be extreme trauma for that to happen. And but you lose, so to if somebody's skeptical, they say, okay, but if something, like my partner's dad, he was somewhere and there was a bomb that blew up and he lost his hearing. Like, of course, that's not what I'm not talking about. That is a very different storyline. But in general, if it just happens and you go, well, I don't know why I've lost my hearing, the left ear actually represents you listening to yourself. It's more of the feminine aspect of ourselves. So that left ear is going, do you ask yourself questions? Maybe the most simplest questions. What do I need? Am I healthy? Is this a healthy thing to do? Do I need more rest? Starting from the basics. Do you do that? How do you feed and nourish yourself? When you have an intuitive insight and you just go, I feel like this is the way to go, do you listen or do you ignore it? That's the left ear. What is your self-talk? Do you speak really negatively to yourself? How often do you do that? Right? How do you self-sabotage? What do you say? What are the things that happen? So there's a lot that happens here. And then we go further and we say, okay, what is your relationship with your mother or really, really important feminine people in your life? And what have they said to you? And has it been critical and negative? So how do you talk to yourself based on that as well? What do you hear? What do you listen to? And then we might break them down even more and we start looking at, well, what is feminine represent? It represents our emotional self, essentially. So if that is the case, and obviously men and women both have the left and the right sides of the body, so we both have feminine and masculine. So we then go, okay, so how have people in general, including masculine people, impacted that feminine side of myself? So then we start to get a little bit deeper. What have I heard? What have they said? Maybe I'm a male, and male people say, well, what are you even talking about? Okay, when you were growing up, were you allowed to express your feelings, or were you told off and, told that boys and men don't cry and don't show feelings and don't do this and don't do that? And how has that affected you? So we start to, and what about your relationships with women and with people, like maybe your partner? What is that like? Or your sister, or whoever it is. So we go down the rabbit hole of how do you hear things? And then when we look at the right side of the body, we start to go, okay, so the masculine self is more about my achievement and what do I do in the world and do I achieve, and and what have I heard around my capacity to be useful in the world? Like, what is my use to other people? How do they see that? How do they experience that? And have they been positive and negative? And again, how much have I taken on of that, and how has that affected me? And then what are my relationship and experiences like with really important males in my life? And what have they told me? Did they say, yes, you can do this, or no, you're stupid, or you're this, or you're that, you can't do it? Like, what have you heard to how it's going to affect you? And so we then start to work through these things, and we start to, when we learn about the body, we can start to become conscious of it, And if I have to go slightly faster through other parts, just very quickly, like the shoulders, you know, in a way, we already have it in our language that we carry stuff on our shoulders, right? And so, again, the shoulders are intertwined and very connected to the heart. So it's like the heaviness I carry around my family on my shoulders impacts my heart, or maybe my business, but life that is heavy, which then impacts my hip area, which is also all to do with family, but now it's to do in on the shoulders. We carry the burdens and the weight. In terms of the hip area, we carry like moving, pushing, you know, like stepping forward. And so it's really funny. I mean, I'm going to say that whenever I have conversations with people and they say, oh, I'm going to have a hip replacement, the first question I want to ask them to literally, who in your family do you feel like you want to replace? Because it's too much. You cannot drag them anymore. And again, I've never met a person where it's not true for them, that they're having these hip issues and, it's not family related. And so when we go through the body, we go, well, actually know a lot of this. Throat is communication. If I don't know how to communicate, which is majority of people, in a way that is effective, especially with my family members, then eventually I'm going to have neck pain. We say that, oh, he or she's a pain in the neck. We have that in our language, right? Already. We know the heart is connected to relationships and purpose. So we'll ask these questions, oh, my heart is broken, from this relationship. Oh, my heart is full. My heart feels so good. You're glowing. Usually your skin's glowing usually means your heart is good. Like you're in a really good place, right? Is your heart in it? We know that the heart is connected to our purpose. The digestive system is all about taking experiences and being able to assimilate them or not. When we can't assimilate our experiences, I don't care what diet you're on, because I've explored majority of diets there are, from anything from vegan, vegetarian, meat, macrobiotic, whatever you want to, kind of look at, keto. Doesn't matter how clean your diet is, if you cannot digest your experiences, you're going to have digestive issues. And what does it even mean? It means that when an experience happens and it's a difficult one, or your mind goes, oh my God, I don't know how to, like, what to do with this or how to assimilate with it. Well, you need to sit with it and need to take time, maybe to journal, to reflect, to talk to somebody, to find how that experience can help you essentially gain wisdom out of whatever's happening and make better decisions, because that's what it comes down to. And sometimes it takes quite a while because we don't always have good experiences. So so all of these, like when we look at bladder, I had a lot of people coming with bladder issues. Well, bladder is very connected to, in some ways, our sense of self around fear, how we experience fear in our lives, and how fear impacts us. And so, of course, when we feel fearful, we run to the toilet a lot, right? When we're in a state of trauma or being frozen, we start to have all sorts of issues around the bladder. And so, when we start to break everything down, it is so logical. Like liver, I've never met anybody who has liver issues who doesn't have issues with somebody close to them in the masculine. Often their father, not always, but a lot of the time. Spleen, the reflection of the liver is always the feminine ancestors, feminine issues that have not been worked through, which then affects your blood and all sorts of things. So the more reproductive issues, well, that's again really interesting, because that's the area that holds shame, guilt, sexual trauma, again, our attraction, how attractive we think we are. There's so much that each part of the body holds, and it is quite different. And when we actually logically understand the body, like, why do we need a spine? Who would you be if you didn't have a spine, right? The spine is your foundation. Like the deepest foundation of who you are is your spine. And again, we have these sayings, that we have, the what are we hiding in our closets? Like what's the word? When we talk about that, in relation to the spine, basically. So it's like we already have so much, of this knowledge in our language in itself, because it is logical. There is a logic around what each part of the body does.
Makes so much sense because I say, if my sister ever gets a sore throat, I always say to her, "What is it that you're not saying?" And even I have an ongoing sore right ear. Interestingly enough, had it all checked, nothing's wrong, but I say now to myself, "What is it that I'm not listening to?" So it all makes sense what you're saying, and then of course, but then how do we? So obviously we know that a lot of our emotions influence our health, right? So how can we be more self-responsible without the blame or because I know for me, I know when I've got something going on in my body, I'm like, oh, what was it that I was thinking now? What is it that I'm not doing? What is it I'm ignoring? Or so how do we not fall into that blame, knowing that our emotions influence our health?
Well, this is where we have to actually develop a little bit of an objective, let's call it wise self, where rather than going into anything from blame, we go into it from curiosity. We go into that exploration from the perspective of what can I discover, as opposed to how's this my fault or their fault or whoever's fault. It's almost like, how, what is it that I don't know about myself? Because at the end of the day, all of this leads back to you knowing yourself and knowing what does and doesn't work for yourself. So again, bringing that example of boundaries that you were saying, or listening to yourself, it's actually, it's like the body's that roadmap that is constantly reminding us that it's our GPS, right? It's reminding us and it's saying, slow down. Somebody's walking across the road, or here, it's go 60 k's an hour, or here go 100 k's. So it's almost like, if I honestly feel like everything in your life is connected to your perspective. And one of the biggest things we can do is to expand our perspectives. One of the ways I've been doing this recently, and I did get an earache from doing this, but I was watching, I've been watching different kind of political commentators, and with, and I've kind of said to myself, I'm going to listen. When I'm listening, I'm not reacting to it. I'm listening to, why are they saying this? What is the reason that they're saying this? I might discern and reflect on it later on, but I'm just going to be open-minded because I'm practicing open-mindedness. I'm not practicing stupidity in terms of just believing anything, but I'm listening and going, okay, that's really interesting as a perspective. The more you do something like that, the more you can do that back to yourself, because you go, well, hold on a sec, why did I do that? What was it about? Let me reflect, but not from a blamey, judgy way, but from being an objective observer. Can I be more objective with myself, and can I learn to be kind? Right? In what way can I be kind to myself? Because we know children don't grow well if you attack them and if you're aggressive and nasty to them and tell them they're stupid all the time. So we start to, as we understand things like that, it's almost like, if I could practice objectivity meets kindness to myself first, what would it be? What would it look like? How would my voice to myself sound? So I might go, okay, I did something, and there's an exercise that I was taught many, many years ago that I found incredibly helpful. And the exercise is basically when you go, I know you said you were going to do three at the end, and I'm just like throwing them in. So let's say when I'm going to sleep, you go through the day backwards. So you start from where you are now, like, it's, let's say, 9 o'clock at night, and you give yourself something like 5-10 minutes of time. And it's like you're rewinding your day backwards, and you get to a place where maybe you overreacted to something in somebody. And at that point, you imagine yourself as kind of expanding, like you're that, wise self. And you go, okay, what made me say that? Did it come from the present, the past? Was I triggered? What was the trigger? What was it about? And so you become a detective. And then and you go, and what about the other person? Did they react from a potential trigger? Again, maybe from the past, maybe even from childhood. And so then you would go, if I had another option, let's say option B, that was much more gentle in how I would respond to this person, what would it be? And you might, depend on how long you've got, you might even go, what would an option C be? And essentially, if you can go back to the full day, but even if you just do 5 minutes of this, what it does is it makes you become very aware and much more objective. And it gives you options of responding that you didn't have before. And for me personally, I started using this anytime I had an argument with somebody, anytime, especially with my kids when they were teenagers, I would go, wow, that reaction wasn't amazing. Where did it come from? It was like, oh, I saw my mom do that, or I saw my dad do this, or I saw this person in my family do it. Oh, okay. What would be an option I haven't seen anyone in my family do, but would be a great option? And I would literally feel and sense myself becoming softer. It was almost like, I feel like color can give you an awareness of, instead of being gray or brown or red in my reaction, I was like, what if I was yellow or pink? And how much softer would I be? And then in my mind, I'd go, oh, okay, this is the way I need to talk to my children. The next time it shows up, or are they around? Can I go and do that now? Because essentially, I want to create a new possibility and a new pathway, which leads to us learning to not blame, but to go, what can I learn from this? And what is another better option, another better way?
I love that. So our body's always talking to us. Are we listening? Because I was having a conversation not that long ago about this lady was saying that, when she was in a relationship, she was always anxious. She was always having migraines and not sleeping well, blah, blah, blah. And she realized that it was her relationship. And when she fell apart or decided to leave the relationship, all of those disappeared. So it was, and she said, my body knew before me. My body knew before my own, like psychology or my mindset. My body already knew before I caught up to it. So it's very aligned with what you're saying. I love it. I'm also really curious about, you were talking about obviously the colors. Colors is, we can go down that rabbit hole, but you talked about psychological archetypes. I would love to hear how you're weaving what you do with the psychological archetypes.
Well, the more I worked with people, the more I've realized that people, nothing is ever kind of separate. So we have a lot of modalities, as you know, and it's, just focusing on the mind or just emotions or just this. And I was like, no, I kind of think it's all connected, and not just connected, it's all intertwined. And then one of the things that people often say to me is, well, I don't remember what happened to me when I was 8, or I don't remember, I was 25 and it was traumatic. I don't remember. And I would say, well, okay, and my perspective was, is it actually to do with memory, or is it to do with perspective, perception? Because is it really about exactly what happened, or how I perceived what happened, and then how I took that on board? And so I was looking at archetypes, and and I came across Jung and many other people who were talking about them. And I was like, so what is it actually? Let me break this down. And what I realized, it was like the thoughts, the emotions, the experiences that were connected to different parts of our body were also connected to this, what Jung called this, our archetypal self, meaning, an aspect of ourselves that maybe stopped growing and developing because something occurred. And I mean, it is very logical. It makes a lot of sense when it comes to to our childhood. And so, when I was 20, I heard about the inner child archetype, but to be fair, it sounded very fluffy to me, and I don't like going down paths which sound extremely fluffy to me until I get an understanding of it. And then eventually I got to learn about different stages of development, from developmental stages in the womb to how traumas around birth, because I had children and I studied that and I wanted to understand it, to developmental stages from like 0 to 9 months, and what can go wrong, so to speak, what can go right, what's healthy, what's unhealthy, and then 9 months to 18 months, and 18 months to 3 years, and so on. And so as I was looking at the stages of development, became so obvious, I mean, when I was studying them, that so many people get stunted and stuck at different timelines, but they don't know, but it is really, really affecting them. And so just to give you an example, it actually happened from a podcast that I recently had with somebody. And this man was saying that when he was 3, he went, I don't know, to a fair with his father, and his father lost him, like literally lost him. And he was lost for, I mean, it took weeks. Somebody else took him in and took weeks to find him. Now, so this aspect of his child went into, I am rejected, I am abandoned, they didn't look for me, I am unlovable now. That's a 3-year-old self that felt that. And I said to him, okay, so what happened? And, eventually he said, well, in order to self-protect, I became extremely angry. And I realized that, there was this constant anger that was coming out. And I was like, well, when did that happen? When did you really become angry? Let's break that down. Oh, when I was a teenager. Okay. So when you were a teenager, there was whatever, an incident, and there was a trigger, probably with a woman, with a girl, who rejected you, that triggered this 3-year-old that said, oh my God, you're abandoning me. And because a 3-year-old cries and screams, and, like, that's what you do. And he said he was literally doing that for years and years, where people like, you need anger management. But it's like, well, yes, you can manage your anger, but until you recognize that it's actually the 3-year-old deeply afraid part of you that is saying, oh my God, I'm lost, and and I don't have anyone, and what if I'm going to be lost like this, that is acting this out as an adult, then you don't really have, you can, you can work with it as a 30 or 40-year-old man, and you can use your will and your thinking to hold it, but it'll still keep coming and coming and coming up. And what I found was that if you actually become really aware of that archetypal aspect and what it contains, and not only what it contains at that age, but how is my life right now impacting that part, right? So this is not about memory. It's like, what did that 3-year-old part of a person what was the perspective that I took on, but also how's it being triggered by whatever's going on in my life right now. And so I found it to be so incredibly fascinating, to a point that the more I looked into it, the more I could see how it was connected to our energy centers, like each archetype, and timelines and time periods, and body parts and our health, and I was like, wow, this is so fascinating. And rather than just working with people with, well, this is the memory that happened, okay, but let's be honest, whatever memory you go to, that was one experience. That archetype holds the gamut of those particular experiences from that perspective. So so I kind of went, if we can connect to the archetype and of that child in ourselves, and rather than trying to figure it out mentally ourselves, we actually essentially create a relationship with it and go, what do you think? What is it that you do believe that I, as an adult, do not believe necessarily, but it's affecting me? Because when I'm tired, when I'm sick, that's the part that takes over. And so the more I found out, the more I was like, oh my God, this is a much simpler, easier way to work on your health and your mental, emotional perspectives and well-being and how you experience and see life, than if we're just going only to one experience, you know, that you don't remember, which is what basically people were saying to me before that.
I think it's just so connected, isn't it? Whether it's colors, psychological archetypes, whether it's your body, we are all one. I think it's so connected, and I think that sometimes too, there's this real culture, and I don't know if you see it, but there's definitely this culture that I'm across, obviously because through the podcasting, but this real culture about love and light, and you hear this bantered around quite a lot. And so for me, I always wonder, like, if knowing that that's part of the culture, knowing that, people say you bring a lot of light and a lot of love into your body. I mean, I wonder how often are we spiritual bypassing, not actually getting to the root cause, which is it's meant to happen. This is all, when really actually it could be a self-projection that we've projected because it's an unhealed wound or an unhealed trauma or whatever, something that we have made peace with, that we projected into our environment, that becomes our reality, our paradigm. And then we are going, well, that's just the way that it's meant to be. Instead of, because there's a real big piece on accountability, I think, as well, with the work that you're talking about, with, working with your body pain, listening to your body, saying that, it's me because I thought this way or felt this way or because of the way that I was treated. There's a huge accountability piece. But yeah, for me, it's like I hear this a lot of times, like some people don't want to take the accountability, and this is the spiritual bypassing. I'd love to hear your thought on that before we wrap up, because I know we're going to wrap up your 3 shiny golden nuggets in a minute.
Oh my God, that's such a big question. And it's the thing that probably triggers me more than anything in terms of this, this industry and this type of work, mainly because exactly what you've said. Like somebody said to me yesterday, they're talking about their child, and their child is actually extremely, extremely sick. And they said, well, I go to see this practitioner, and she just said that the reason my child is sick is because her frequency is so high. And I'm just like, what does it even mean? Like, I understand music as frequency. I understand, kind of like an energetic device as frequency that we have now because we have so many of those. I don't understand that in a person who's sick. How does it even make sense to say, like she's so sick, but because she has high frequency? Like, to me, that is idiotic. I'm sorry. Like it's there's no logic to it. I said, well, okay, show me, you know, I've studied the physical body meets the subtle bodies that we have inside ourselves. And I couldn't do what I do if there were no subtle bodies, because the physical body is quite dense. And to get there, you actually do have to get through the subtle bodies. And this is part of us becoming more sensitized and more internally flexible. And this is actually why I do agree that we need medicine, because there's so many people who just nowhere near that. And at that point, you do need medicine. I'm not a big fan of medicine because of the side effects, but I am a fan of the fact that it saves lives, right? And unless you're internally flexible, you may need it, at different points in your life, because to actually heal means you need to really have the capacity, the flexibility, the willingness to take responsibility, like you said, in that particular way. So when we say, oh, I'm just gonna, send love, and it's like all of this is nice, but to me, healing has become this generalized, kind of anybody can do it. We don't need to see, we don't need to hear, we don't need to just we can just do it. We just wave our hands and now we can charge money for it. And I actually think that's extremely, extremely dangerous, because I have studied this 25 years and I mean studied it. I know how to study. That's one of the things I'm very good at. And in the last 2 years, I've probably spent, I don't know, 15,000 buying books, the kinds of books very few people on this planet will read because they're very difficult to read, and it's because I want to know more. I want to understand more. And I get that the more I learn, the more I know that there is to learn and understand, because we are so deep and complex. And so what I say to people is, if you want to heal and get to know yourself, because they come together, it doesn't work any other way properly, then if we talk about healing in terms of tuning in and understanding yourself and working with yourself, and no one can do it for you, by the way. People can help you, and I'm all for going, Chinese medicine. I love it. I go as well. But no one can do the deep inner work for you, because they cannot do it for you. That is you who has to do it, right? And so unless we are willing to stretch our minds a little bit to the fact that healing is not a generalization, it works well and much faster when it's specific. And when it is generalized, you have to keep coming back, because band-aids don't work, right? Because eventually you're actually going to fall apart. And healing is about building a foundation, like a real foundation for yourself that works. And as I was saying, I just remembered what I was going to say about the closet, that, we talk about skeletons in a closet, because we know that skeleton is connected to that depth, right? Foundation again. So your body is showing you all the time where things work and when they start to break down. And I think it's exciting. I don't know, I think it's, rather than this whole bypassing and, I don't want to, and I just want to get to the result. It's like, you're here because you actually need to know yourself. Because when you know yourself, you know what you stand for, you know what you're about, your ethics, about the choices that are right and wrong to make for you in your life. And your inner being, your body, is that map that comes back and says, like you were saying with that person you spoke to, the body doesn't lie. So it, without 100%, you can lie in terms of your mind. You can try and lie to yourself, but the body will not heal. It will not lie. It will not change or hold the change, I'm going to say, unless you fully are starting to understand things. It might hold things, and you think it is, but something else is actually underneath it breaking down. And so after 25 years, Catherine, I have zero interest in skipping steps, because all that it does is it makes you lose your faith. It makes you lose belief. It makes you it makes you confused. It makes you feel bad. It makes you go round and round in circles and say, nothing works. I'm that person. Nothing works for me. That's what it leads to.
Well, I think that that's very much into people looking for a quick fix, because I mean, doing the work, you got to do the work, right? The inner work that you talk about. So I am conscious of your time, my dearest. So what we'll do, I think we'll have to get you back on the show. There's so many. I haven't even gone through my. It's kind of a theme for me. I always do a lot of research on our guests, and then I never get to ask the questions because it's all about you, right? But I love where this has gone to, like really going into the body, the emotions, the color, the psychological archetypes, and so I love that. So as we wrap up, Ina, we love to leave our guests with 3 shiny golden nuggets, and they can be 3 practical exercises. What would they be for you?
Well, for me, it's, make a decision to befriend your body. And that decision will lead to slowing down and starting to connect to your body, like the example that I gave. And as you connect to your body, you ask questions, and those questions lead to insights and understandings. And I'm going to say, please, as number 3, write down those insights, write down, actually journal, write down those understandings, because what's going to happen is as your inner being, your health, your emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic, any part of your health, relationships. I think relationships affect your health intensely, as you were saying about your friend, as or that lady. Write things down as they come up, and start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And if I can just add one more thing to this, when you're doing anything to do with healing, let's say you have 3 issues, it is vitally, vitally important. Especially also if you're working with my book, The Secret Language of Your Body, or anybody's work, but you're doing this specific work, you need to have a theme, and you really need to hone in. And even though you have 5 issues or 3 or 20, you have to work on one at a time to have real impact. Because when you work on one thing at a time, and you, like you said, you don't bypass, you don't skip steps, and you become detailed and you look for things, you're also working on the others. But if you do one properly, your inner self goes, oh my God, I've succeeded. And success leads to more success, which then means it is so much easier to work on the next aspect, theme, issue that you've got, because you went, oh my God, this part worked. Now I have self-belief. Now I'm going to go even more investing into myself and learning and discovering than I did before. And so you start to, and that's what I see with all my students, the ones who really do the work, is that they do this, they work on one aspect, and could be self-love, could be my knee issue, could be my digestive issue, could be whatever, my relationships, and they see real transformation and change, and then they go, oh my God, this works. And now more of them goes into the next process. And so do things one by one. Do not try and do 5 at the same time.
That makes sense, because I think it'd be the one that would be the most painful. Because I've got a few, as you're saying, I'm like, well, I've got a few, and my back at the moment. So I'd probably focus on my back first. So I love that, because otherwise it would be too confusing for you to get clarity on the theme, because you were talking about the theme, right? I'm sure as you start working through the body part by part, you'll start connecting to the theme, whether it's career, whether it's relationship, or whether it's family. So I love that. I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wealth of wisdom. I can see you're very passionate about what you do. That's very clear. Absolutely. We'll have everything in the show notes. Where do you hang out the most? Social media, Instagram, YouTube?
I do spend a fair bit of time on Facebook, I'm going to say at this point, but I also really encourage people to, what I want people to do is to hear this and get excited, and then go to my website, innersegal.com, and go to the masterclass page. I have a lot of masterclasses, and at this point, this may change, but for now, they're free for people to sign up to. And the masterclasses go between, I think, 2 to 4 hours, depends on the one you choose, depends on the theme you're working on. And they really, what I do is, like, it could be a masterclass where I go through all the body parts. Like, there's one called Awaken Your Intuitive Body. And this is you really understanding the systems and the parts of your body and how they all work together. And I give people between, sometimes 1 to 3 processes, depends on the masterclass, that they can start to participate in and go, oh my God, yeah, I feel this, or I have a different, I feel a difference. Yesterday, there was a masterclass that I was doing, and this lady said, oh my God, I did not expect at all that in a free masterclass we would go this deep and the process would reveal all these aspects to me where I'm understanding myself so much more and my pain's gone. And so it's very, very important. And then have a journal and write notes. That's like really what I want people to do, because that's where you're going to get the most transformation.
Wow, thank you so much for your offering, and thank you for all the work that you do in this world. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for your time, your energy, and your wealth of wisdom. Honestly, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.